So what we have going on here is this is a 2016 Transit with 115,000 miles on it, 3.7 liter, and it's got 11 ribs right there on that tensioner pushed out. That's way too far. 7 or 8 is max, and that's when you need to start looking into chain replacement. But that is right at 11 ribs. That means that chain is stretched, and it's been beating on that crank pulley back and forth, and you could hear it slapping, and the crank pulley just popping back and forth on that crank pin that you see later. We actually do get it out of there, but it's just all wore the hell out. Luckily, we were able to catch it in enough time, because what would have ended up happening is that chain would have went, or that sprocket would have started to slip down there. It would have threw everything out of time, and those pistons would have kissed those valves, and this motor would have been done. That we would have been putting a long block in here. So at this point, we're just kind of talking. This is my coworker. He works right next to me, and I said, man, I got to do a video on this to show people exactly what kind of goes into this stuff. Great engine, and really clean for 115,000 miles overall. But these people are in here changing the oil in this thing religiously. They're not one of those companies that like to go 6,000-7,000 miles on their oil change. They're in the dealer all the time by 5,000 miles changing their oil. They actually go exclusively off our oil recommendations here, and the engine's very, very clean. Had a lot of life left in it. You know, it has a lot of life left in it. Nobody's ever been in there. You can see there's no excess silicone or anything like that. There's not a lot of sludge. The cover on the sides were leaking just a little bit, so it was time for the cover to be resealed anyhow. And so what we have going on here is just going to show you how wore out the crank sprocket is on the front of this. Basically, the timing chain got so sloppy and loose, and the adjuster came out so far it wasn't really able to do very much more. It actually started working back and forth on this crank under load, and you can see how much movement is in this thing. It's just a ton of movement, and that will throw your timing all out of whack. And this chain was slapping, and it was running rough. It wore out half of the little guide key in the crank. You can actually pull that out and replace it. I'm going to show you here in a little bit how you can get that out of there when it's broke off real bad like that. And even if there was nothing sticking out of the crank, you could still use this method to pull that little nub out of there. You can see it, just you pull it out, tap the new one in, you're good to go. So whenever I get around to speeding this up here, you can see we tried to heat it a little bit, just a little, and it wouldn't budge. We actually had to go to another method that we know would work. It's just been beating on that for so long, sheared half of the face of it off, and basically now we have to get to a point where we go to a little bit more heavy duty measures to get it off of there. And I'm just trying to show you the correlation of where that sits. And now here we go to the process of removing the pin that's in the front of the crank. We took a torch, kind of heated around it real good just to try to see if we can get it loose. Got the welder out, built up a little booger on the end of it, got it real hot, and then it started to move. Well, we need a little bit more to grab onto, so we're going to build it up, let it cool, build it up, let it cool, build it up, let it cool, and do this over and over again so we get the weld to stay there. And use a pair of vice grips, grab it, and then a clip puller tool to kind of get up underneath it and pry up. As we're moving it back and forth, it pops right out of there, you'll see. There it goes, it starts to rotate, and it just goes boop, pops right out. There it is. Got some little nick marks right there, but nothing a little piece of Scotch-Brite or something won't clean up. It wasn't real deep. It looks worse than what it actually is. Any of the material that fell down into the bottom of the pan while we were doing this, including the welding sparks and stuff, we ended up pulling the drain plug and washing everything out into a pan underneath, and we did it several times and then blew it all out, so there's nothing left there. It just all got washed out the bottom, which was very little to begin with anyway. You can see there's actually a crack down the center of that pin where it sheared that top part off. Yeah, pretty rough situation, but these are the types of things that would happen. 115,000 miles, 2016 Transit with a 3.7 liter. Clean it up real good and then wash it out afterwards, and basically job well done.